Hello, so this is a tutorial video on how to get cinematics triggered in Unreal Engine 4, and also once we've triggered those cinematics, actually that's the last thing we'll actually show you how to do, but first thing I'll take you through is actually setting up a couple of camera changes and putting something on the timeline so you can animate it or move it around in a cinematic in your game. So without further ado, what I'm doing here is I am starting a first-person shooter template project, which I'm going to call Cinematic Demo. Okay, so I will click on Create Project. Okay, so what we are looking at here is the standard first-person template. I am going to quickly talk you through what I intend to do here. I intend to get off this menu. Okay, so what I'm thinking is I'm going to set up a cinematic where we have a camera that just pans around from here to here, then jumps over here to a different camera, and then pans, maybe drops down, slides across, comes around here, something like that. I might change my mind partway through, but that is the first thing I'll set up. Okay, so without further ado, the way we put things into a cinematic timeline is we create a level sequence. So let's create one right now. I'm going to call this cinematic sec 1. Just imagine we might make multiple. Save. Now that should be in my world browser. I'm just for good practice, go back here and just create a new folder, sequences, and I'll move that into there, move there. Okay, cool. Just in the same way you'd create any sort of asset, it's a good idea if you're going to have a bunch of cinematic sequences to create a sequences folder. Okay, so opening up the sequencer, which I've got docked down here, I want to take you through this quickly. So a couple of the basics of the controls. This thing is your timeline sort of scrubber or reference point, so that is currently at frame 41. I'm actually going to suggest straight away we actually change this to be 0.1 of a second as a timeline. What that's going to let us do now is make camera changes or whatever in the timeline on down to 0.1 of a second accuracy. Another thing I want to show while we're here, this red line here represents the end of the cinematic. I'm actually going to make this now a 10-second cinematic. So that's the length of the field we're looking at here, and I'm going to drag that out to what I believe is the end. Is it the end? Here we go, 10 right there. So now I've got 10 seconds to play with. You can adjust that anytime you want, so it's not fixed. Okay, so now, as I said, we're going to set up some camera cuts. So before we do that, we're going to click on this to key all channels / properties when only one of them changes, and to auto key all. What this means effectively is as we make changes, it's going to update what we do into the timeline over and over. So that's a lot better than us having to manually enter every single thing we do. Okay, so let's, oh God, there's something weird about the way this is set up. Right, cool. As I said, will start the camera over here and just do a little pan across the room. Now, as my start point, I don't have to put it at this start point, but you can. I'm going to create a new camera and set it as the current camera cut. Blat. Okay, so this has created two things. I'm going to minimize one of them for now. It's created camera cuts, and this is your actual series of camera shots over the course of your timeline. And you can see it here, it's sort of represented like visual frames. Doesn't mean that there's 7 frames, it's just showing that's the kind of scene you'll be seeing at that point. Now, the other one here is the Cine Camera Actor. Now that is just an object that was produced and named for me right away. it's got a variety of things here, but key things to point out, these buttons here, these lock the viewpoint up here to be that current item. That's extremely useful to be aware of as you're playing things back. Also we've got things like transform, so that is the actual location, rotation, etc. of the camera. Extremely useful. Okay, so without further ado, I will just actually stretch this up a bit so you can see the transform stuff. So what I'm going to do here is bang. Now I just moved the view just a tiny bit. See these keyframes just appeared? That's basically Unreal Engine going, okay, so at that point you were in this location facing that way, etc. That's fantastic. Now, what I want to do is maybe over the course of 3 seconds, I am going to have us swing the camera over to the left. So I've moved the timeline marker to 3 seconds, taking control of the camera. Now this isn't recording the path, it's just me setting it into another position, right? The path is going to be determined by the engine itself. It will do a nice smooth curve between the two. You can adjust how curves work using this stuff in here. I'm not going to get into that at all, but I know if you're looking at the way the camera moves and you go, no, I need that to swing faster there, or I need this to be more linear and less of a smooth curve. That's where you'll find those controls. Okay, so now I have created a camera that goes from one position to another in 3 seconds, theoretically. So I'm going to lock the viewpoint to camera cuts and rewind, which just moves the timeline back to the beginning, and hit play. And as you can see in the viewport, it's already doing that pan. Now you notice it's just continually holding the camera here. That's fine. All I told it to do was move the camera to a new position at 3 seconds. It didn't say turn off or anything, so that's why this view has stayed here. Now, I have decided right now at this point that I don't want this timeline to go for the whole lot, so I'm going to wind that back to 3 seconds, and I am going to move the timeline point there, and now I am going to create another camera. And if I can stop clicking on existing assets as I move the camera over, like I said, we'll do one from up here. Now I will click on create a new camera and set it as the camera current cut. Bang. Okay, notice it's called it Cine Camera Actor 2, and the previous one was Cine Camera Actor. I will point out to you that it's entirely possible sometimes these numbers won't be 100% sequential. I'm not sure why that is, but just something for you to be aware of in case you're like, why is that camera gone? It might not have gone, it might have changed number. They do seem to stay in the same order though. Anyway, so now I've created this camera and I'm controlling that camera view up here, and you notice the dot here, a keyframe has already been created. I'm just going to scrub this across to maybe 7.5 seconds, and actually no, I'll move it just to 5 seconds, so we'll do a quick hop, a quick hop across this, then over the course of 1 second we'll bring the camera just down a bit here, and I'm not sure that it's actually noted my transform at this point, so I'm going to click here to add a new key at the current time. Bang. There we go, we can see it there. Okay, this is really interesting. I'm going to undo that. I'm having an issue, and I'll actually leave this in the video so we can see what's going on. Okay. I have the right camera selected. There already was a mark, so just something to be aware of. It's really easy to be thrown by the the details from one timeline and another, so that just happened to me right then. Apparently this is working fine. Okay, so let me scrub through this. That's how it's looking so far. Come across, down, and I will now maybe go out to 7.5. Over to here. It's created a keyframe for me. Over the course of the 9th second, I'm going to race over to here. It's made a keyframe, and then I'm going to return to roughly where we were the first time round and do this. Who knows if the camera will turn in an ugly way or not? We will find out. Okay, now I've still got this camera selected, so just to see the whole thing now, we go back to making sure the camera cuts is selected. You'll notice that right now here there is nothing there. There's a couple of interesting things here. Another thing I'm noticing is if I play this, that's not as expected, is it? So something you will find as you create camera cuts, etc. Here's another thing I can show you that's happened. At some point, I clicked on one of those walls in the background, and maybe I moved it at the tiniest bit, or maybe made the computer think I was going to move it. What that's done is it's added it to the timeline as a movable object. This is actually how we'd move a character through a scene. We're going to delete that. That's not deleting Big Wall 2, it's just deleting the reference to Big Wall 2 within my sequence editor. Okay, so I'm actually going to delete the first video. What this is, it's not deleting the first video, it's deleting an inclusion of a camera in that part of the timeline. And for this to make a bit more sense, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to insert Cine Camera Actor 1. I said, there it is there. Notice it put it at the timeline. There's the timeline marker. It added it to where that timeline was. That was not the right place for me to have it. I should have selected here first, and it would have appeared here. And this is a 3-second camera cut, so I'm just going to draw that line out to the, I believe that's the 3-second mark right there. Okay, next I will move this line here, and I will say plus camera, which just means add a camera view from below. Now notice I talked about the numbers being out of order. This one says Cine Camera Actor 3. This actually is referring to this one here. I don't know why it does this. But now if I scrub through that, you'll see it is that camera that I created that zooms everywhere and turns around crazy. Okay, cool. So what you see is what you get in a way. Just by scrubbing through here, we're just going to get the same thing when I play it, just to prove the point. Here it is nice and smooth up top. Cool. Now, those are really wild sweeps. You probably won't have a cinematic scene where those are useful. I just wanted to show you that moving the camera around, it's naturally going to try and smooth things out for you, and will move things to a timeline, and that's a really good demonstration of that. So the final things I wanted to show you, as I showed you with Big Wall moved around in a scene, or was an object that I'd sort of picked up to move around in a scene. And what I need to do now is, the reason my window is not responsive, unlock viewport from camera cuts. Now I can move my camera. Cool. So the very first point that we start, I believe, is here. Right, that's where the camera starts. What I'm going to do is I am going to create a, we don't have a cylinder in this shot, so I'm going to pop this chap here. I will materials, no. I'm going to give it some sort of material so it just stands out of, no, I don't want to edit that. Wrong window, that's why. What have I got here? Clay old. Cool, okay. Hopefully that's a little bit more distinct. So I have this object with a material on it now, just so you can see there. And I'm going to start moving that object about in the timeline over the course of our video. So move this back to here. Now I think I already actually because I already nudged it and moved it about, it's actually added cylinder into the timeline. This is really useful. So just by touching it and moving it a tad, we have got a keyframe has just appeared. I am going to now move it about. Hopefully, based on, oh, this is cool. Now I can show you this. It's showing you the curve that that object is going to take over the course of the timeline, which is cool. And up to here is the end of the cam, but I'm actually going to move it wherever. But what I've just done there, I think maybe at a guess, yep, the transform is set at the end here. I'm going to delete that. The reason I'm deleting that, if you see this line here, it looks like it's actually trying to return there later on. If I delete that, bang, there it goes. So now there's no keyframes ever stating that the cylinder was back here later on, so the object is going to stay there. Now, hopefully, if I rewind the lot and go and lock the view to the camera and pull it down, hopefully we should see what, there we go, there's a cylinder. Hey, it ran around in view, and the cylinder is still staying over there. I think if I deselect it, you wouldn't see any of those lines, but here we go. Let's try this another way. Play. Whoops. Of course I'm playing the game now. It's different, but there's one more thing for me to show you. Cool, there we go. No construction lines on it, so which is great. Now, the final thing that I want to do here, of course, now, if we do hit play, you'll notice we don't get a cinematic, even though this is the same area we've been looking in. There's none of that sort of stuff. So, bang, that's loud. So, what I'm going to do is jump out of here. We want to set something in the game to represent a point which would trigger that cinematic. So, it could be anything. It could be when the player runs out of health, when the player makes a certain choice, whatever. For the purposes of this demo, I am going to unlock the camera, which is something you'll get used to. So unlock the camera, select this box here, there we go. I'm going to make, and this is just a box collider, trigger box, where are we, scale. I am going to improve the scale to be 5 by 5. I say improve because it was tiny and it will be easy to miss. I'm just putting this in a corner, and as I back out, I'm also going to just pull a cone into the scene just here. That's just to help mark where that area is. I can pull it up further to make it easier to spot. Cool. Now, because I've got a trigger box, but it doesn't actually do anything yet. Now, there's a variety of ways you can do this, but when you set up trigger boxes, I'd really strongly recommend that you get in the habit of using the right mouse button and go to Add Event. In this case, I want to on actor begin overlap. So I click that. Now it's opening up the blueprint for the level itself, right? And you might end up having lots of things in here, but right now this is the only blueprint in here. So I want to drag out from this pin, and we want to go cinematic. Okay, so I have typed in the word cinematic just to get an idea of what I might need. And I see here create level sequence player. Now we have a sequence, a level sequence set up, so we want a player for that. So that is the thing we need. And what we want to do, remember we called that cinematic, that sequence something, what do we call it? Cinematic sec 1, there it is. So all of the ones that you actually saved will already be there available. You could have that come off something else that might be determined by code, but for right now, we can just do this manually. Okay, so the final thing I need to do is, just because you've got a player doesn't mean it's playing. We actually need to give it the order to play. So literally we get the play command, and you want this return value to go out of there into the target. So if I compile and save that now, what we should have is a trigger that will launch our cinematic. Let's see if it works. Okay, so I'm looking for, there's the cone just to help me find that box. Bang! And now we get a cinematic camera cut with a cylinder character moving around in it for a bit, and me doing a crazy camera pan. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. Feel free to ask questions, but hopefully that should get you up and running in terms of getting cinematic cameras set up, moving the cameras around, and how to move actors around within the scene. Just be aware of some things when you trigger a cinematic within your game. If you don't take steps to stop gameplay and player input, you can totally have the players push a character into a scene that is midway through cinematic that you don't want, or they might die and the game state might end or something. So just be very mindful of that as you approach how you're including cinematics in your game. Okay, good luck. Cheers.